Bread. Good old crispy, doughy bread. Good for so many uses. Like toasting, sandwiches. You know the only thing better than real bread? That's right, virtual bread. Bread made in a piece of 3D software. Because you don't have to get your hands a little sticky. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be making bread using Blender. And this is the finished result that you can see right here. We're going to be focusing entirely on the bread though. We're going to leave the rest of that junk out of it. Just the bread. And you might be wondering, why should I care about bread, man? Because it's a pretty obscure tutorial topic, I guess. I mean, bread is pretty weird. But people have actually been requesting it, believe it or not. So if you're not into bread, do know that the technique that we're going to be learning, it can be used for most foods. So whether you want to make a zucchini or an onion or I don't know, pizza. Anyway, it can be used for making a variety of different foods. So if you're into architectural visualization, you want to make a kitchen, you can put some food on the table, stuff like that. If you want to have characters talking over a dining table, you can have food. A lot of people avoid food because it's quite hard to make. So I'm going to be showing you how you can make some realistic food. So that's good. We're going to be learning about organic materials, which is different to my usual tutorials, which are all about the hard surface modeling, like concrete, stuff like that. So organic materials allow light to pass through the object, which is different. So we're going to be learning all about the new subsurface scattering node, which has been added to cycles. So if you've been curious about that new feature, we'll be covering that, which is exciting. We're also going to be discovering why displacement maps are awesome, if you didn't know already, and also why normal maps are awesome. So that's why you should care about bread, man. Anyway, give you a tutorial overview. This is what we're going to be doing. First of all, we're going to be modeling the loaf of bread, duh. Then we're going to be getting into some displacement mapping, adding in a little bit of extra detail. Getting into the materials, into the subsurface scattering, all that extra stuff that gives it its realistic look. Then we're going to cut the loaf. So we're going to cut it like clean down the side, and then we're going to be adding in a separate texture and everything to give it that, you know, cut loaf of bread look. And then finally we're going to be rendering it. So the idea for this tutorial actually came way back in 2010. I made this tutorial, the realistic kitchen tutorial. And a lot of people asked me, hey Andrew, how did you make that bread sitting on the counter there? And to me, I thought the bread looked horrible. But believe it or not, a lot of people wanted a tutorial on that. So I said, I'll get around to it eventually. I'll do a tutorial soon. So I figured that now, 3 years later, is probably the perfect opportunity to do a tutorial on it. This is what it looked like up close, believe it or not. Look how realistic it is. I mean, that's a photo almost. Anyway, before I started this this project, I did a bit of research online to see if I could find some textures for bread, and it turns out there's actually not that many textures, believe it or not. Like for food in general, there's not many textures at all. So I thought, well, why don't I make my own? So I went to a baker here in Korea, and I bought this loaf of bread. I bought it, and I thought, I gotta make a texture somehow. So, I mean, you don't have to be a pro to photograph your own textures. That's sort of like one of the things I used to think was like, you have to leave it to the pros, like making your own textures. Like, it's actually pretty easy, believe it or not. All it is you just have to try and eliminate the shadows and the highlights. And that's actually fairly easy to do. What I did was I went to the store and I bought a tablecloth, which is like this clear film tablecloth thing. And I stuck it to my window. Because that's, and what that'll do is that'll diffuse the light so you don't get harsh shadows coming through. And then I got one of those office container boxes, and I put some of that tablecloth around the box as well. And then I put the loaf in the box, and then I positioned the camera over the top of it, and then took a photo. And essentially what that will do is it will give you this result, which is I guess it's what the photographers would call like a white box, and it's basically to give even lighting in all directions, essentially. So that's like super budget version of a light box. I think that cost me $6 in materials. But anyway, so I got this photograph, and I also photographed it from a number of different angles, and then I sort of stitched all the different angles together. and then I got this result, which looks bizarre. It looks like you've ripped out the stuffing of the bread and flattened it out. But that's exactly the result you want. Like, you can see that there's very minimal shadows, and there's very minimal stretching, and you can see that that would be very useful. Yeah, so that's the texture that we're going to be using for the loaf of bread. I've got that texture. You can download it underneath this video if you're watching it on Blender Guru. And as well as that, after that, I cut the loaf of bread, and then I photographed it as well. And then I got this texture here, which is what we're going to be using to get that cut loaf of bread look. So then when you take those textures, you put it in Blender, you get this. That's without the rendering, of course. That's just with the textures. And then, of course, when you render it, you get something like this. So I put it in a scene. I decided to go for like an early morning, you know, breakfast with some jam and butter and coffee and stuff like that. You know, always good to try and tell a story. As I said, we are just going to be focusing on the bread in this tutorial. I do want to keep things fairly brief for you guys, so you guys can make a story out of your bread if you want. I don't know what kind of story you could make up, but anyway. All right, let's go ahead and jump into Blender, if I can find it. This one, bing. All right, so this is the finished scene that you can see right here. There it is. So the mesh itself, believe it or not, it's actually quite simple. It's pretty low poly. So we're going to be using the help of some displacement maps in order to get that extra detail there, as well as normal maps, which will give us even finer level detail. And then we'll be using different materials, so a separate material for this sliced bread look on the front there. So yeah, basically having a bit of fun, and you could use this this loaf of bread for a variety of different scenes in order to give it a human touch, you know, in every type of scene that, you know, you're making. I don't know, it's good to have food in it, I guess. Struggling to come up with ideas for what you could use bread for. I'm sure you'll come up with something. Anyways, let's go ahead now and crack open a new scene in Blender. Now, whenever you're modeling anything in Blender, you want to think about the overall shape of it. Now, having a look at our reference photo here, you can see that the basic shape of this loaf of bread is it's almost spherical. It's almost like a complete sphere. So you might be tempted just to make a sphere. However, you can see that the way the bread has been baked, you can see that there's like this sort of undercooked area in the middle here, and then this sort of outer shell, which is sort of forming this crusty top, which is sort of like broken apart. So if we can actually model in that geometry, then we will get a more realistic looking result. So you want to be thinking about, you know, like the basic shape of things, and then how you can model that. So sometimes, like, starting with like a easy object like a sphere can sort of hurt you later on, because you won't have the initial detail there. Anyway, let's just get started, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So crikey, did I oh, we haven't deleted this. Okay, so delete the default cube and the lamp, and the first thing I'm going to do is load in that that texture that I just showed you before, that stretched out looking texture. So if you're watching this on Blender Guru, the texture there is already provided for you, so you can download that. So this is how it looks. So you can see here we've got this this cross area. Okay, so this is sort of like lower than this outer crust area, which is slightly raised higher. So the first thing I'm going to do is model in just this white cross looking area. So I'm going to start with a plane, and then I'm just going to move this plane just around, just very roughly at first, like such. And then I want to take these edges and then just stretch them down to be roughly that shape about there. So you want it to essentially, like, see this crusty area here, this brown area? You don't really want it to touch that, so you just want it to be in the white area. So something about that is pretty good, okay. And then this one here as well. Okay, that's all right. And then finally this area over here. And then we'll scale that down. Okay, cool. So that's pretty rough. So let's add in a loop cut, just so we've got a little bit more detail, so you can sort of match it up a little bit better. All right, that's good. And then one here as well. Okay, like that. Pretty good. And this one here specifically, that one goes there, that one stretches out a bit. Okay, all right, and then one there. Okay, cool. So that is the cross area. Then what we want to do is create that raised up surface, which is going to create the rest of the loaf. So what I want to do is select all of the edges. So if you just go to edge select mode, then hold down Alt and Shift and then just right click, then you can select these edges around the outside. And then, oh no, yeah, okay. So with those edges selected, press E to extrude, then hit Escape, and then just scale outwards like that. And essentially, I want to scale it to be about there, pretty much. And then just go back into vertice select mode, and you just want to move this so that it's in the position of where these four corners, like this brown crusty corners, where they sort of start, like about there. Okay. About there, move that to there. And with this edge, we're then going to raise that up so that it's at a different height than the white crust underneath it. Okay, just moving this along. If I sound like I'm sort of talking weird today, I don't know what it is. I'm just really tired recently. I've just been passing out on the couch here in my office. I have no idea why. I'm so tired. I'm getting the appropriate sleep. I'm just exhausted. And so I just woke up and it's like 7:30 at night now. And I'm like, I was supposed to be recording a tutorial. I was going to have a quick nap and now at the time, where's it gone? Anyway, okay, so we've got this outer crusty looking edge here now, so that's good. And what I want to do is now just create some faces. So basically just joining this up so we've got one big square basically. So I'm going to take this here, I'm going to extrude that one vertex out. I have to be careful the way I say vertice or vertex, because people always comment, say no, if it's a singular form, it's vertex. Okay, so we take these vertices and form a face. All right, so I'm just going to do that for the rest of this, basically. Now, it was weird when I was out on the streets and I was looking for a bakery to buy the bread. I saw this girl and she just had a shirt and it just said in big, bold, white letters, "Don't hate me." You know, and I mean, I get what she's going for. You know, that edgy sort of look, like, you know, "Don't judge me, man. You don't know me." And so I understand why she's wearing the shirt, but whenever somebody's wearing something like that, I immediately feel like, what have they done? You know, because a normal person doesn't feel like that. Like, hey man, like, you can judge me if you like. I mean, it's your choice. But somebody that is immediately saying, "Don't judge me, don't hate me," I feel like, I don't know. What have they done? She could have some crazy past. I don't know. She could have some whacked out opinions. Like, "Don't hate me, man, but I don't feel like gay people should be allowed to marry. Don't hate me," you know? And it's like, I don't know. If wearing the shirt is the most, well, is the best idea, you know? It sort of just immediately makes you suspicious of that person. It was kind of weird. And but to be honest, I mean, I'm pretty sure she didn't understand the English written on the shirt. She just bought it because it had English on it. You know, it's weird in like in Western culture, people will buy shirts with like Japanese writing on it or whatever. And over here, people buy shirts with English writing on it, and often it makes no sense. But because it's English, I think it's cool. So it's kind of weird like that. Anyway, so sorry, just to explain what I'm doing now. I'm just taking this outer edge here and extruding it. And this is going to be forming basically, this is like the top part, like the top of the bun. And then extruding this outwards here. This is going to be like the side of it. And then this edge here, wherever this edge meets, that's going to be where the loaf sort of touches the ground, if that makes sense. So then if I extrude that out even further again, then that's going to be even more of it, which is going to like tuck underneath the bread. Okay, so that's just the basics of that. So now I'm gonna just go into the UV image editor and load in that same texture, like so. And then I'm gonna hit U and then select project from view. And then I just wanna scale this up to be in the exact same position as I've got it over here. I wish there was an easy way to sort of like match it, like exactly how I've modeled it, but I don't think there is. I don't know. Maybe somebody can tell me. Anyway, so you just want to match it up as best as you can. But it was weird, yeah. When I was in Japan, I met up with the Japanese Blender community, and I became good friends with a guy called Yushi. And he told me he went to Germany, and he was just on a trip in Germany as a student or whatever, just doing stuff as a tourist. And he made some friends, and one of his friends was wearing a shirt that had Japanese writing on it. And it made no sense. It was just made absolutely no sense. And he thought it was hilarious. He took out his phone, took a photograph of it, sent it to all his friends back in Japan and laughed at it. And it's kind of weird because now I do that as well. And all of my English speaking friends in Korea and Japan, they all do the same thing. Like there's people just walking around wearing shirts with English on it that makes no sense at all. And it's quite funny. Anyway, okay, so I've matched it up as best as we can, so that's good. Awesome. All right, now we just have a flat plane, and it doesn't look like bread yet, but it shall. So what I'm going to do is grab this outer edge right here. I'm going to push O to turn on proportional editing, and then change that editing fall off to be sharp, like that. And then if I push G and then Z, I can now move this down to create the basis of the bread loaf. So it's almost a sphere if you have a look at the original reference photo. So it's pretty vertically high, I guess you could say. So if we just sort of move that down even more, like that, that's pretty good. Okay, that's all right. Now I'm going to turn off proportional editing, and I'm going to scale this in. So this is the part which is going to be tucked underneath the bread, like that. We're not modeling the actual base of the bread because we don't need to see underneath it, so that's fine as it is. And then I'm just going to scale that in like that. All right. And then I might actually also take it and just make it a little bit more vertical as well, like that. Now our original cross here is sort of, actually let's just turn on, push Control 2, and that's given it a subsurf modifier. But you can see that our original cross here has sort of disappeared. It's sort of gone flat with the rest of the bread. So I'm just going to select it and just drag it down a little bit, like so. There we go. Now we're sort of getting to the actual shape of the bread. One thing that's bugging me though is that it looks like a square a little bit. So it should be more of a sphere. So let me just take these edges here like that. And if I just turn on proportional editing, then we can get a more circular looking shape. Alright, so we're getting there. We're getting there really slowly. It might be boring for you. I don't know. It's just how it is, man. What can I do? What can I do? How can I make it more entertaining? All right, that's the pretty. It's pretty good. Okay. All right. So I want that origin point, that little dot there, to be sort of on the ground, like flat with the base of the bread. So I'm going to select that that whole area there. Push S, then Z, then 0, and now that has given us a flat base like that. All right. That is pretty good. Pretty good so far. Okay. Alright, now if you were using the Blender internal rendering engine, you could just go to viewport shading texture mode and you'd be able to see that texture now on the bread. But because we're using cycles, we have to actually give it a material first before you can actually see it in textured view mode. So let's go to the node editor, switch it to materials, and then click new material. And then if I add in an imaged texture node, and then just select that texture that we just loaded in, you can see that it's now appearing on the bread. and just connect it to that diffuse shader. So we've just got a very basic looking material right now. And there you go. So what you're looking for is anything that looks a bit too stretched or out of shape or, you know, whatever else. But the basics of it is pretty good. So you can see that by modeling in that cross area, it's given us that geometry, which makes it look a little bit less fake than if it was a complete sphere, you know what I mean? So we're just going for as realistic of a look as we can. Whoops. One thing that I can notice though is that these corners here are quite smooth looking, very smooth looking because of the subsurf shader we've got going on. But in the real photograph, you can see that they're quite sharp, these edges here. So to fix that in Blender, we're going to be adding in some creases. So just select these edges here, just one by one, like this, and this, and this, and then also the edge just underneath it as well. So the edges around the base of it, like that. And then if you push Shift and E, and then just drag outwards, what that's doing is it's creating a crease. So you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see it says crease and then a value. So you're getting a value anywhere from 0 to 1. So I don't want it to go 1 because then you can sort of get problems when we add the displacement later on. But somewhere around about 0.6 looks pretty good to me. So something like that. And you can see that now looks a little bit better than it did previously. So that's good. This area here just looks a little bit strange to me. So I'm just going to fix up that. Just stretch that out a little bit so we don't have any problems there. All right, that's good. Awesome. So turn on smooth shading if you haven't already. And yeah, awesome. All right, the bread's coming along quite nicely. So what we've got now is the basic geometry of the bread. So this is what you would call like large level detail. So it's the block sort of geometry as best as we could put it in place. But you can see with the original reference image, you've got a whole bunch of extra detail in here. You've got like these all the crusty little crunchy bits on top. They've all got geometry to them, right? Now, if you were to try and model that yourself right now using, you know, in here, subsurf, and then putting in the detail, it would take a very, very long time in order to get all of this detail here. And you probably wouldn't achieve it very well because it would be, yeah, it'd be really difficult. So what you can do instead is use a displacement modifier. So I'm aware that some of you probably know what a displacement modifier is, but for those that don't, a displacement modifier is one that you add right here over in the modifier stacker. Just go ahead and add in, gosh, where is it? Displacement. Okay, displace, and then click on new. Okay, so what's that has done is it has applied a texture, and it's using a texture to displace the geometry of this bread. Okay, so you can see that it automatically looks so much better, doesn't it? Look at it. It's horrible. All right, that's because the texture that it's using is a cloud texture currently. So if you go to the texture panel, then select, it's got a section here, modifiers, displace texture. So click on that, and you can see the type is it's using a cloud texture. So what we want to use is an image texture. All right, and then go ahead and click on open. And this texture is one that I have pre-generated, okay? So this is how it looks. It's this one right here. It's a grayscale version of the original texture. So I used a piece of software called Crazy Bump, which generates a whole variety of different maps, one of them being a displacement map. So it's basically a grayscale softened version of the original texture. So yeah, if you don't know what Crazy Bump is, you can have a look at my tutorial that I made a few months ago called Advanced Texturing, I think it was, where I just went all through Crazy Bump and showed you how to use it and everything. But anyway, so I've given you the textures here on Blender Guru, so you can just download this texture. So go ahead, click on open. And once you've clicked open and loaded it in, go back to the modifier stacker and then change the texture coordinates to be UV. And then what you want to do is turn up the subsurf amount to be about level 5, all right? And then turn down the strength of the displacement until it looks natural. Okay, so I find generally a strength value of about 0.1 or 0.2 will give you good looking results. Maybe 0.2 even. Yeah, that looks not bad. That's pretty good. Okay, cool. Awesome. So you can see, obviously, that is a lot better than what it was previously when it was all smooth. By adding in a displacement modifier and using the actual texture itself, we've given it a lot more detail. But what I would call this detail is sort of medium level detail, because if you have a look at the original reference image, there's a lot more detail on the kind of, not microscopic, but like, I don't know what level detail. It's called like high level detail, you know, like the little bumps and the little tiny specks of dust on here. So, sorry, somebody's just sending me messages. Oh, it's my wife. Oh dear. I don't know what she's saying. What time can I be home? She wants me to come home now. I'm doing a tutorial. Anyway. Okay, so what we've done so far is we've got the large detail and then the medium detail. Now we want to add in the fine level detail. So to get that, what we're going to do is we're going to use a normal map. So what I spoke about before, using Crazy Bump generates a whole variety of different maps, one of them being normal maps as well. So a normal map is actually used in the material itself. So this is in the material of our bread loaf. So we're going to load in an image texture. So go ahead, click on Open. And this is what it looks like in the thumbnail view. I'll just put the full image there so you can see how it looks. Again, this is made using Crazy Bump. You can generate your own if you just download Crazy Bump, or you can just download the one that I've already provided for you with this tutorial. So go ahead, click on Open, and you can see that's how it looks over the original mesh. You can sort of change. It's weird, like Cycles will let you just click on whatever node. You can see how it looks on the mesh, but it's this weird purpley looking texture. A normal map is a special bump map, basically. Some people say it's a more accurate bump map than a grayscale map because it allows for an extra direction, basically. Anyway. I'm not getting too technical, but with a normal map, you can't just use it as a normal bump map. Like, you can't just put it into the displacement modifier. You have to put it through a normal map node like that. So you take the color value of this and then put that into the color input of the normal map. And then you take the output of the normal and then put that into the normal input of whatever shader you are using. In this case, just a diffuse shader. All right. So then from here, there is one extra step, and you want to make sure you always remember to do this. With a normal map, you want to set it to non-color data space, okay? If you don't do that, you'll get weird looking shading. Trust me, it looks horrible. Okay, so now we've done that. We've given it, this strength here will let you define the strength of the bump map. But anyway, I'm going to give it a render now. Before I do though, let's get rid of the background image. Okay, and I'll add in let's add in a lamp. Whoops. We're going to give it a sun lamp. The image that, the sort of style that I went for was like a morning sunshine sort of look. So let's just, I don't know, try and imitate that, I guess. Strength of the sun, I'm going to go with 5. I'll give it slightly orangey yellow colors to look more like a morning sun. And let's go sort of front view on to the loaf of bread. Well, not exactly front view, something like that. Okay. Okay, that's pretty good. All right. Now, good idea to save it before you get any further ahead. Okay. Awesome. All right. So now we can go ahead and render it. Let's have a look at the fruits of our labor. Labor. Okay, pretty good. You can see that the bump map, like this fine detail that you're getting on the edge here, that's because of that normal map that we added in. And so it's giving us that fine amount of detail. And we should be getting in, you can't really see it from this angle, but let's just sort of go in a little bit further. Something like that. That's pretty good. You should be able to see the detail of our displacement map as well, which is giving us that medium level detail. So we've got the large detail, which we modeled ourselves, then the medium level detail, which we got from the displacement map, and then the high level detail from that normal map. Now, one thing to note now, though, is we have another problem, and that is that our loaf of bread looks like it's made out of concrete, almost. Like it looks like it's a heavy rock. And the reason for that is that there is no light which is passing through the bread. And that is where we get into the next topic, which is organic materials. So organic materials are basically anything that I guess is, well, not alive, but allows light to pass through it. So you yourself are an organic material. How's that? A little special snowflake you are. You're an organic material. So basically, if you hold up your hand to a bright light source, you should see within like the webs of your fingers, light is passing through the fingers, your fingers, and it looks kind of red in color. And that's because light is able to pass through the body and through the blood, and you're getting like this red sort of look. So in the 3D world, that is called subsurface scattering. So previously, Blender has had that feature for years. However, Cycles has only just recently had that feature built into it. So as of the last release, you can now do subsurface scattering. So what I'm going to show you now is how we can apply that to the bread, because bread, especially here on this dark shadowy area, in a normal normal photo of bread, if you have a look at our original photo here, light is actually passing through the surface of this bread, and it's actually lighting it. And although it doesn't look very noticeable, like if you're looking at this and you're trying to think like, well, where is the light passing through the bread? I can't really see it. It's supposed to look subliminal, like not subliminal, like subtle. Yes. If you can see the subsurface scattering, I think you've overdone it a bit. So, but basically, the result that we have at the moment looks like a rock because the light isn't able to pass through it. So let's get into subsurface scattering. Cool. Awesome. All right, let's just move this around a bit. Okay. So subsurface scattering is added to Cycles using a subsurface scattering node. So this is in the shader section. So go ahead and click on add, and that's how it looks. So to give you an overview of what this does, this color value, believe it or not, is not the color of the light when it passes through a mesh. It's actually the color of the surface. So it's basically treated almost as a diffuse shader, almost. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the output of our image texture node and just put that into the color input like that. Now the scale is how much of the light, or sort of how far the light will be able to travel through the surface. So if you wanted it to be, I don't know, something not very, like something hard. I'm just trying to think like what's sort of hard, like, I don't know, like a hand or I don't know, something. Then you would use a low value. Like a lot of people use like 0.2-ish value for a lot of different things. Whereas something like butter, for example, allows a lot of light to pass through it. So that would have a higher scale value, you know, and you can sort of turn that up to be, gee, what's the maximum amount? I don't even know. Look at that. You can go crazy. Anyway, the value that we're going to use for our bread is just 1. I've done a bit of experimenting, and I've found that 1 generally works pretty well. Now this value here, this one, radius, this is the confusing one, and to this day I don't know why they've done it like this, but this radius value is actually the color of the light that is going to pass through the mesh. Now you might be thinking, well, how is it the color? Because you've got, first of all, it's called radius, and also you've got 3 values. Again, don't know why they've done this, but basically these values are the RGB values. Red, green, and blue values. I don't know why it's not just something like this so you can choose the color. In fact, actually, I would put money on it that in the next Blender release, that's actually what it's going to be. People have already asked on the Blender Artist Forum that they change it to be like that. But for the moment, if you want to change the color of the light that's passing through the mesh, you have to add it in here. So in our case, for the bread, it's actually pretty easy because the light that passes through a bread is almost white, but it's slightly yellowish. So we're going to use 1 for the red value, and then 0.9 for the green, and then let's go 0.7 for the blue. And that should give us a slightly yellowy looking color. All right, so now how do we combine that with our diffuse shader? You combine it using a mix shader like this. And then basically, as with everything, you know, I'm sure you've all used Cycles materials before. the closer, sort of the higher you set this to 1 will give you 100% of this subsurface scattering value because it's in the bottom shader. If you set this to 0, then it's going to give you 100% of the diffuse shader. So what you want to do is get a blend of the two. So generally I find around about 0.7, 0.8 is something you want to be experimenting with. That's generally the best values to go for. So the subsurface scattering, if you just leave it at 1, it almost looks like the diffuse shader just by itself, but it looks sort of like slightly, I don't know, almost buttery because of the light that's passing through it. So anyway, so you want to have some diffuse and some subsurf scattering. So let's go with 0.8 and let's leave it at that. And let's go ahead and hit render. Hey, now doesn't that look better? No, it doesn't, okay? There's a problem, all right? For one, it looks really dark, right? So you might be wondering, like, what's going on here? In fact, if you turn this up to 1 and render it, you'll see it's black. So what has happened, okay? Well, this took me a while to figure out myself, but this feature, subsurface scattering, is so new in Blender that it's only available to be rendered on your CPU, for one, and also it's not actually a supported feature. It's an experimental feature. So you need to make sure that it is currently, at the time of this recording, I'm sure in the future it's going to be enabled for GPU as well, but for now we are going to have to use CPU. So I'm going to change the performance. Let's just go 16 by 16, okay, for my CPU rendering. That's the best sort of tile method. Okay, all right. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and hit render on that, and let's have a look at the result that we get. Ta-da! All right, so now you can actually see it having an effect. So this was previously a completely dark looking value. Now you can see it's got a little bit of light to it. So it looks, automatically, it looks a lot more realistic than it did previously. So this is how it looked before, if we give it that a render of just the diffuse. So this is just the diffuse by itself, and then this is with the subsurface applied to it. So you can see how it sort of made it look a lot more organic and a lot more like real piece of food, you know? So that's what subsurface scattering does. So it's not just for people, not just for human faces, it's for all sorts of organic materials. So so that's pretty much it. So at this stage, we can, I think actually, I'm not too pleased with how much of the, yeah, I think there should be more of the, this base sort of showing. So I'm just gonna move that cross area up a little bit and maybe make it a little bit more vertical like that. But it's pretty good as it is. Let's set that back to be 0.8 and we'll give it a render. One other thing I might do right now actually is if you have a look at the original reference photo here, there's not very much, but there is a tiny incy-wincy little bit of gloss. Gloss being reflection. So there's a few little highlights here. So we can add that to our bread if you wanted to go for like even more realism. You can add that by using a glossy shader like this. And where would we add it? Yeah, we can add it in here. That's fine. Okay, so we're going to add it as, actually, no, it should be added before the diffuse shader. No, yeah, all right, we'll add it after. Okay, so we're going to add a mix shader, drag this in here. And what I'm going to do is, because I don't want the entire thing, because if we were to just have a look at this in the rendered viewport shading mode, we don't want the entire piece of loaf to have this shiny looking effect. Only some parts of it should be reflective. So that's where using Crazy Bump has helped, because we also have a Specularity Map, which looks like this. I'll load up the whole image so you can see how that looks. But that's what a Specularity Map looks like. Pretty grayscale looking. Basically, the dark areas will have 0 reflection on it, and then the white values will have extreme reflection, and then the gray values somewhere in between. Anyway, so if we load that in, if you click open, we can then connect the output of the color value into the factor input like that. And you can see that has now given it a little bit more realistic values, but it's given it too much glossiness. So what I'm going to do is add in a color ramp node, This is my new favorite node. I like to use color ramp. And then basically the white value will define sort of the maximum amount of reflection. So currently it's too high because it's set at white. So if I just scale this down, I'm just going to get less and less looking reflections. So you don't want it to look like it's like been soaked in oil or anything like that. Just a really soft amount of reflection. So just something like that. And you can see that looks pretty natural. That's not too bad. It's not too over the top. And I'm leaving the roughness at about a 0.2, maybe 0.3 value, something like that. And that's just going to give it a very light looking reflection when it hits, reflects off light. So that's just going to give it more realism, basically. So there we go. Okay, cool. All right, awesome. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the loaf. All right, because we are again at looking at the finished result. The loaf of bread is cut in half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move. Well, first of all, I'm going to duplicate this loaf, and I'm going to move that duplicate to layer 2 all by itself. Okay, so just over here, I'll just position it in the background or something. Okay, and so now we're just going to be working with layer 1. Okay, cool. So what we want to do is I want to cut the bread, the loaf of bread, about here. Okay, so pushing Control R, I'm creating a loop cut like that. And then if I just push C, I'm getting the circle select tool. I can select this part of the mesh. And then if I hit P, I can make that its own separate object like that. And then I'm just going to move that object to my trash layer. So if I wanted to use that object again, I can, the rest of the bun, but I'm now just going to keep it as this, okay? So the first thing you want to do is, because this is all like jaggedy, you want it to be flat, because you want to make it look like it's been cut with a knife, obviously, not with, an axe, sort of been hacked to pieces. So I'm going to push S, then Y, and then 0. And that's now given it a flat, completely flat, whatever you call that, angle, surface, whatever. All right, so we now need to fill this in. Now, thanks to B-Mesh, if you wanted to, you could just hit F, and you now have a nice looking face there. However, for this edge, for this face here, this sliced face, we're going to be using the Displacement Modifier again for the actual texture that we're going to put here. So we actually need there to be some proper geometry. So we can't get away with just putting a flat, big old face over the whole thing. So we want to have quads, meaning square faces. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want there to be sorry, I'm just trying to find the words as I'm working. I want there to be a square face right here as our first one. So that top area there, I want there to be a small face. And there's my wife calling. All right, so I'm going to pause the recording and answer the phone. And I'm back. Okay, cool. Yeah, she was very embarrassed. I told her she's featured in the tutorial now, so she got all scared. All right, cool. Sorry. All right, that's the reference image. That's the blender. Okay, cool. What was I doing before I was distracted? All right, that's right. Okay, so I've created one square face right there. Why is iTunes doing its thing? Okay, so I want to create another one right here. So I'm going to push Control R. And right there, okay. And create, oh gosh, sorry. It's completely thrown me. Having a call. All right, create a square face right there. Okay, that's good, awesome. All right, so now what I want to do is I'll take these two vertices and I'll just extrude them downwards to be about in the middle there. Because you can see we have some geometry. 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Okay, man alive. Okay, there we go. All right, and then we want to create another face right here. So this is not the most thrilling part of the tutorial at all. Just me umming and ahhing and figuring out what I'm going to do next. We're trying to get square faces, all right? So 4 vertices. So just looking at our mesh, you're sort of working out how you can do that. So this area here, we've got a few. Let's just move that back a bit. Okay, let's create a face there, another face here. And then with these 2 vertices, let's extrude that outwards. And then we'll create a face on the bottom and then another face right there. Yes, awesome. That actually worked out not too bad. Okay, cool. All right. So now what we want to do is we want to give this edge here a bit of a crease to it, because currently it looks very smooth. It looks like it's been, I don't know, melted off or something. So, so go into edge select mode and just select that edge loop there. And then again, like what we did before, push Shift and then E, and then just pull outwards and you'll get a crease. Now, one thing I noticed, I posted my original render on Twitter, and I had the crease set at 1, and everybody immediately said, almost as if like they had joined up and decided to all tell me at once, that the edge was too sharp and it looked fake. So I didn't realize it. That's why you have a fresh pair of eyes to look at your work for you. That's why I like to post things on Twitter, because after you've been working on something for a while, you can sort of not notice things. But anyway, you don't want to go for a solid crease value of 1. You want to go with, okay, so if it's at 1 now, I'm going to go minus 0.4. So a crease value of about basically 0.6. So that sort of smoothed off look that you can see right there. Now, when you go out of edit mode, you've got all this displacement over it. And you can see the displacement looks horrible. And the reason for that is because if you load up the UV image editor, like this, and then load in the original texture that this was based off, you can see that our original, like the rest of the loaf, is properly mapped as it should be, but all this new geometry that we've just created over here is now bundled up in a corner over there. And we're not actually going to be fixing that problem, because the rest of the loaf is fine as it is. What we need to do is we need to actually create a separate UV map and then a separate displacement map for the actual slice of bread, which is going to be visible right here. So if you go to your object panel over here, you can see there's a section for UV maps. So normally, if you've probably, I don't know, just done basic modeling, or I don't know, basic scenes in Blender before, most people will have only ever used one UV map, but we actually need to use 2. So with everything selected there, I'm going to click plus, and that's going to give us a separate UV map. So I'm going to call this new UV map, I'm going to call this slice, and I'll call this other one loaf, just so we can tell the difference between the two. So believe it or not, when I select this one here, this slice one, it's now displaying a separate UV map. So I could now take this and scale it, wickety whack, whatever I want, and then now when I go back to loaf, it's fine. So this slice is a completely separate UV map than the original one that we've done there. So we can do whatever we want to this one here, and it's not going to affect the UV unwrapping that we have done in the past. So what I want to do now is I want to load in with the slice one there selected. I want to load in a new image, and it is this. It's called slice. So this is, again, one of the textures that I photographed. And what I want to do is, because we've got the rest of the loaf of bread sitting behind it, it's distracting me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of those vertices that I'm not going to use, and I'm going to hit H to hide them. And now, with just these ones here selected, now we've got just the front-facing, I don't know what you call it, front-facing faces towards where the slice of bread is going to be, okay? Oh, man, I'm sort of been thrown. Okay, so I'm going to select U and then select project from view, and then what I want to do is just position this to be roughly the shape of that slice right there. Okay, like that. Cool, awesome. So what we need to do now is, so that we've got 2 materials happening. So we need to have 2 materials for our actual object. So this material that we've got is for the loaf. So now we need to give it a separate material for this sliced off front here. So I'm going to select that same material again, and then I'm just going to hit the number next to it, just so that we've got all the same, you know, the material stuff that we added before. And I'm just going to call this new material slice. And then what I'm going to do is down here, I'm going to start basically just replacing these textures with their equivalents. So I've got the slice color map, which is that one right there. So I'm going to click open for that one. And then I've also got a slice normal map. So that's slice normal. That's what this looks like right here, which is again that purpley looking texture. And then over here, you've got, actually we don't need gloss at all because the slice shouldn't have any reflection to it at all. So that's fine. And the subsurf scattering, we're going to leave that as is as well. One thing to note though, the normal map, because we have now got 2 UV maps, we need to actually tell the normal map which UV map to use. So we need to tell it to use the slice UV map. So now if you go to textured view mode, you would see that we've got some, okay, first of all, we've got, yeah, like weird looking textures going on. All right, so first thing we need to do, we haven't actually assigned the texture to this new material. So with these vertices here selected, push assign. And now you can see that we now have that slice now in view. So it's looking pretty good. It's not too bad. Now you can see that there's some of the corners of that, like you can see these corners are a little bit white. So I think the UV mapping for our slice of bread, sorry, the slice, is it's a little bit overstretched, I would say. Like it's sort of over, what would you call it? I don't know. Yeah, we can pull that in to about there. All right, and you want to try and get this crust area to be as far out as you can without it sort of going into the white area, because the crust is what will help the it'll help it make it look realistic, because the viewer is you know, used to seeing real bread, and when you cut the bread, you get like this area, you know, as you can see right here, where there's the crust, and then it's like cooked on top, and then it slightly becomes more and more white as it goes in. So if you can get the crust matching exactly where the bread meets, then you'll get it looking really realistic. So we're trying to get it as close to that as we can. So this area here, in fact, I'm going to move up so that I get that there. All right, and then this guy, I'm going to move that down. Oh dear, no, we got to move that. Okay, pull that to there. Okay, so just trying to get it as realistic as we can. I mean, a lot of this is going to sort of like be disguised because we've got, you know, the rest of the material happening, so we can sort of get away with a bit of it, but trying to get it as realistic as we can with what we're working with. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now, next step is the displacement modifier, because currently you can see we've got this horrible looking displacement modifier on it, and you can see that it's in the shape of the cross there. That's because it's using this displacement modifier that we've added just before. So what we need to do is add in a new displacement modifier and make it just for this slice of bread. So the way that we can assign a displacement modifier to only one part of the mesh is by using Vertex Groups. So Vertex Groups are what you would see right here, Vertex Groups. So if you've ever done weight painting, push Control Tab, you can see weight painting, right? So what we need to do is we need to tell Blender that, bring back the rest of the mesh, that this area here has a vertex group, and the vertex group is called loaf, and then we then need to assign, by hitting assign, with a weight value of 1 on that, just these vertices right here. So then if you hit Control Tab, you should see this, the red area being a value of 1 and the blue area being a value of 0. Okay, so now if you go back to the displacement modifier, you can now select vertex group and then select loaf. And you can now see that our slice here is now completely separate and doesn't have that horrible displacement map applied to it. So that's good. Also, while we're at it, we might as well set the UV map to be loaf, which shouldn't really change it very much because I think by default it's already using, yeah, because it's got the default one, whichever is selected, it's got the camera next to it. That's what it's going to use by default. So you don't normally need to set that, but I'll just set it anyway. Sorry to confuse you by just talking, rambling. Okay, so now we're going to add in another displacement modifier underneath that one. Okay, so we're going to click New for the new texture, then go to the texture panel here, and then you can see now you've got 2 displacement textures. So we're going for this new one we've just created, and I'm going to click. Oh, hang on. Was that the right one? Did I just delete the wrong one? Hang on. That one's there. And that one is that one. Okay. Yes. Okay. So this is the new one, I think. Gosh, what am I? Hang on. Let me see. using that one. And that one is using that one. Okay, we'll see if it works. So we're going to use, again, an image texture for the displacement. And we're going to click open. And again, I've used that same slice texture there. And I have generated this one, slice underscore displace. And again, that's just a grayscale version of that texture. Okay, so then going back to our, what do you call it, displacement map over here, we're going to set the texture coordinates to be UV. And you want to set the UV coordinates to be slice. Okay, and then because you can see it's now putting it over the entire loaf of bread, you only want it to be applied to the front faces. So we need to actually give it a separate vertex group for now the slice. So again, click plus for the vertex group here. And actually, let's just turn off the displacement map so we can't see it. Okay, that's good. And we're going to call this UV vertex group, sorry, I'm going to call it slice. And I'm going to go into top view mode, and I'm just going to select these faces here, which make up the slice, and I'm going to hit assign. So then if you go into Control Tab, you should see that right there, which is now showing a value of 1 for the slice. So this is the loaf, and then this is the slice. So now, as you can probably guess, what we're going to do next is go back to our displacement, and then for the vertex group, I'm going to select slice. And there you go. So now we just, as we did before, I'm just going to turn down the strength of this until it's something which looks suitable. So I actually find a value of about 0.05 works pretty well. Now, one thing to note is that we've got a lot of detail in the center here, and then towards the edge, it looks like the texture's sort of been stretched a little bit. Now, the reason for that is that we don't have a lot of geometry here. You can see these faces are like rectangular, and rectangular faces are a problem when you've got a displacement modifier. So what we want are square looking faces. So I'm going to hit Control R and then make 2 cuts right there, and then Control R here and make 2 cuts as well. And now we have a lot nicer looking displacements. And you can see also now along the loaf of the bread, we've now got the sort of the opposite problem. It's sort of giving us too much detail in that direction. So if you wanted to, you could sort of fix that up by adding in more geometry here, and then more here, and then more here as well. I generally don't like to add lots of geometry because then it sort of limits your options for you know, changing the mesh later on. In fact, now that we've done that, I think we can probably get away with less subsurface. Yeah. For the actual mesh itself. So anyway, that's pretty good, what we've got right there. Okay, so I mean, we're almost done now. This is pretty much it. I think maybe turn that up just a little bit more for the slice. Okay, that's good. That's all set up. Okay. The loaf of bread, I want to make sure that's using the UV coordinates for the normal map for the loaf, not anything else. Okay, so now let's have a look at the render with our slice. Hey, look at that. Doesn't that look wonderful? It looks like some weird Danish pastry looking thing. It's horrible. Okay, the reason for that is that it's using the UV coordinates for our slice, but it doesn't know what the UV coordinates are. By default, it's just using the default loaf UV coordinates because that's what it will use by default. It will always use the whichever one has the camera checked next to it. So because this is for the slice, we need it to use the slice UV coordinates. So how you do that in the material nodes here is you add in an attribute node. And if you've never used an attribute node before, don't worry, there's not really much use for it other than this. At least this is the only thing I've ever used it for. What you need to do is type in the name of that UV map exactly as it appears. So the name of it is slice. So then I just connect the vector to the vector inputs just like that. And it should actually, that one there as well, normal, yes, okay. Vector, normal. Hang on. No. That's not right. Or is it? Oh, no. That shouldn't go to the normal. Okay, cool. I was almost getting a bit confused there. All right. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead, hit render again, and we should see that it now actually matches the UV coordinates. And there you go. You can see the finished looking render. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's roughly the tutorial summed up. I think if I was to add some quick adjustments to this, I think that that hastily added in loop cuts has sort of made this area here look crazy. It's got a lot of geometry happening there right now. So maybe I would turn down the strength of the displacement modifier to be 0.1, which I think will give it a more accurate representation. And also, I think I'll make this a little bit more higher vertically, because I think the if you see the original texture of the like the slice, if you sort of compare those two together, you want them to sort of look the same. So sort of vertically is about that shape there. But that's pretty much it. You can see that the light, because we've got the subsurface scattering node in there, you can see the light is sort of bleeding into the bread slice there. So it's looking quite good. And it's not too bad. So if I now add in the loaf that we've created in the backdrop there as well, maybe let's just put in a plane as well while we're at it, just so we can see some shadows happening. I'll just do a final render with everything that we've just created here. Add to there. Alright. And I'll just give it a little bit more samples for the render. And let's just go ahead and give that a final render, and let's see how that looks. And there you go. That is the finished render that you can see right there. So you could do a little bit of fine tweaking here and there to sort of make it look its best. I think maybe the subsurf scattering is a little bit too much for the actual loaf of bread. It looks a little bit too waxy to me, so you might want to turn that down a bit. But that is roughly it, guys. That is the... Ooh, gosh, where is it? This one. There we go. That's it. That is the finished result. So I'm hoping that this tutorial was useful to you for creating any types of food that you're going for, and I'm hoping that I'm hoping to see some cool looking bread renders, that's for sure. So go nuts, go crazy, make some cool looking bread, maybe make better bread than I have here. Maybe post that, send that to me. I don't know. This was sort of like an experiment, half for myself, half for you guys. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Hope you learned a couple things, and I will see you next time.